Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. Welcome to C.S. Lewis's favorite books, part two. We're going to get an introduction to the Faerie Queene. This is a book written in 1590. We have a small group here, but I'll still ask my discussion question. What do you know that was going on in 1590 or 15 anything?
Well, it's 100 years after Columbus.
That's a good reference point. In England, 16th century. What else was happening, Deanna?
I mean, it's before Shakespeare, right? Because
Mhm.
he was 1600s. Is that the year they had the prince who, it's like they had kept going through princes, like the princes in the tower?
Do not connect it to that in my mind. Um,
And wasn't there the War of the Roses?
well, the Reformation was still unfolding. That's what I was going for. You're asking these other details that are not connected to Fairy Queen for me yet. You may be right.
No, that was 1483.
This is the hey, good for you. But this the English Reformation is beginning, or it's a couple of generations old, depends how you want to look at it. And this informs the Fairy Queen as a piece of literature. See, I was asking you for a theology answer, and you knew the more of the history stuff. What Edmund Spenser becomes is the first great Protestant English poet, and he sets out to create a Protestant literature as England has broken ties with Rome. And he sets out to craft this 12-volume poem on the virtues of being a Christian. He actually doesn't finish it. He goes to heaven after only finishing 6 books. And so we have the first 6 volumes of the Fairy Queen on holiness, temperance, chastity, friendship, justice, and courtesy. But we have to wait for heaven to read the other 6. He sets the discussion of these big ideas, these important timeless things, in fairyland, in the time of King Arthur. When it's so long ago, there can be no discussion of the Roman Catholic Church abuses, the independence of England. All of these melt away, and we see fairyland. And you'll see the way he still manages to talk about those issues. Um, C.S. Lewis, I have a quote about this book. C.S. Lewis says, "Beyond all doubt, it is the best to have made one's first acquaintance with Spenser in a very large edition of the Fairy Queen on a wet day between the ages of 12 and 16. To read him is to grow in mental health." I will point out not many 12 to 16-year-olds are ready to dig into this book. This is a challenging read because he purposely wrote it in very old-fashioned language. He was trying to sound like he's from the past. Shakespeare sounded contemporary. If you have a hard time reading Shakespeare, this sounds hundreds of years older than him. But it is a deep and a rich book that's been my privilege to teach. Edmund Spenser invented a new kind of stanza, which you'll get to hear in a moment. A 9-line stanza with his own rhyming scheme to bring this to the page. And so I'll read you some of it. Watch for some new words, but see if you can just get the sense of what's happening. I'll put the words up for you. A little bit of background. This is the story of St. George fighting the dragon. It is, and if you don't know that story, you do. It's a knight fighting a dragon to free the city and marry the princess. That is the story of book one of the Fairy Queen. Edmund Spenser took that story and showed why it is important for hundreds and hundreds of lines of poetry and how it is a deep and important story. I'm going to read to you the part when when he is fighting the dragon. By this the dreadful beast drew nigh to hand, half flying and half footing in his haste. that with his largeness measured much land, and made wide shadow under his huge waist, as mountain doth the valley overcast. Approaching nigh, he reared high afore his body monstrous, horrible, and vast, which to increase his wondrous greatness more was swollen with wrath and poison and bloody gore. And over all with brass and scales was armed, like plated coat of steel, so couched near that naught mote pierce, ne might his course be harmed with dint of sword, nor push of pointed spear, which as an eagle seeing prey appear, his airy plumes doth rouse, full rudely dight, so shaked he, that horror was to hear, for as the clashing of an armor bright, such noise his roused scales did send unto the night. He fluffs his scales like feathers, and because they're made of brass, it clatters across the battlefield. And I hope that you're seeing the words along, deciphering some of these foreign words along with me as I read. I'm not pausing to explain it. I'm hoping moving forward will kind of carry the meaning. His flaggy wings, when forth he did display, were like two sails, in which the hollow wind is gathered full, and worketh speedy way. And eke the pens that did his pinions bind were like mainyards with flying canvas lined, with which, when as him list the air to beat, and there by force unwonted passage find, the clouds before him fled for terror great, and all the heavens stood still amazed with his threat. His huge long tail, wound up in 100 folds, does overspread his long brass scaly back, whose wreathed bouts whenever he unfolds, and thick entangled knots adown does slack, bespotted as with shields of red and black. It sweepeth all the land behind him far, and of 3 furlongs does but little lack. And at the point 2 stings infixed are, both deadly sharp, that sharpest steel exceeden far. He's giving a lot of description to this dragon. You picture how big it is? Sharp, harder than metal, sharper than steel. Pay attention to that sting in its tail. But stings and sharpest steel did far exceed the sharpness of his cruel rending claws. Dead was it sure as death indeed, whatever thing does touch his ravenous paws, or what within his reach he ever draws. But his most hideous head my tongue to tell does tremble, for his deep devouring jaws wide gaped like the grisly mouth of hell, through which into his dark abyss all ravin fell. You love that word, raven? Or, you know what it means to be ravenous. So dreadfully he towards him, the knight, did pass, for lifting up aloft his speckled breast, and often bounding on the bruised grass, as for great joyance of his new-come guest, eftsoon as he began advance his haughty crest, as chafed boar his bristles doth uprear, and shook his scales to battle ready dressed, that made the Red Cross knight quake for fear, as bidding bold defiance to his foeman near. The knight gan fairly couch his steady spear, and fiercely ran at him with rigorous might, but the idle stroke yet back recoiled in vain, and found no place his deadly point to rest. Exceeding rage enflamed the furious beast, to be avenged of so great despite, for never felt his impierceable breast so wondrous force from hand of living wight, yet had he proved the power of many a puissant knight. And I had a wonderful illustration here, but Google doesn't like it, so let me bring it up. Oh goodness, Google really doesn't want to show that. That's too bad because it's a wonderful picture. Let me grab it really quick because this comes from an illustrated version. I was going to say they fight, and I'm going to skip some stanzas so that we can get to a part that really shows you what this poem is all about. But I saved the pictures, so let me just grab those. Let's open these up. Here we go. Okay. So here's the illustration I wanted to show. For my summary, they fight, and the dragon picks him up, and they're fighting in the air, and he's burned with fire. And here's what happens next. This is from a wonderful children's illustration, illustrated book of it, and I'll show you the author next if you want to make your first foray into Faerie Queene. Then full of grief and anguish vehement, he loudly brayed that like was never heard, and from his wide devouring oven sent a flake of fire, that flashing in his beard, him all amazed, and almost made afeard. The scorching flame sore singed all his face, and through his armor all his body seared, that he could not endure so cruel case, but thought his arms to leave and helmet to unlace. Doesn't Satan want us to take off the armor of God? Think how hot the armor would be when a dragon breathes fire on it. This is when Satan's temptation comes. He wants us to take our armor off as if that would help. Faint, weary, sore, emboiled, grieved, burnt with heat, toil, wounds, arms smart and inward fire, that never man such mischiefs did torment. Death better were, death did he oft desire, but death will never come when needs require. Whom so dismayed when that his foe beheld, he cast to suffer him no more respire, but gan his sturdy stern about to weld, and him so strongly strike that to the ground him felled. That's a tough stanza. The man is so beaten up, and then the dragon thinks he's finished, turns around and smites him with his tail, knock him to the ground. But it fortuned, as fair it then befell, behind his back, the knight's back, behind his back, unweeting where he stood, of ancient time there was a springing well, from which fast trickled forth a silver flood, full of great virtues, and for medicine good. Whilom before that cursed dragon got that happy land, and all with innocent blood defiled those sacred waves, it rightly hot the well of life, nor yet its virtues had forgot. I should have put a footnote for that. Whilom means before. Before the dragon has come and stained the land with blood, but there's this fountain that is still pure water. For unto life the dead it could restore, and guilt of sinful crimes clean wash away. Those that with sickness were infected sore, it could recure, and aged long decay renew, as one were born that very day. Both Silo, this and Jordan did excel, and the English bath, and eke the German spa, nor can Cephas nor Hebrus match this well. Into the same the knight fell the back overthrown fell. And I'll pause there. I'll show you the picture. What is this well?
Hey, yes, that's we
We
know
have
that
that one.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
have it. Do we have it? I thought we just
I
got
think
it
it's a
from the
library book.
Yes, we got it from the library several times and loved it.
What is this well that restores the dead to life and washes sin away and makes the old young?
It's living water.
Mm-hmm. What else? There's a lot of connections here. Can I think of some more?
It's baptism.
Yeah, it's also baptism. A lot of stories about water in the Bible.
The woman at the well. He talks to.
Yeah. the well that Jesus was at, even though that was probably normal water, she met the real water there. Yes, maybe that's one reason he calls it a well and not something else. So notice how many things the well can represent. And on the next day, the well restores the night, and the dragon can't even believe it, and they fight again, and the dragon wins again, but this time the knight is flung down by this tree. What do you think the tree represents?
Tree of
Wow.
everlasting life.
Yeah, tree of ever, and the tree seeps oil, and the oil falls down on his wounds and heals him. What does that make you think of?
Well, it's anointing him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the way the apostles anointed the sick. So he gets up now on the third day, and we all know what's going to happen because it's the third day, right? We can immediately see what the third day. And he chops off the sting in the dragon's tail, and defeats the dragon. And I like this part of Fairy Queen. I chose this to share today because obviously different people in even this room have different beliefs about baptism or anointing with oil, but we all respond to this story. Whether or not you believe that baptism washes your sin away, it does in some way, right? And the Fairy Queen doesn't specify how that works. This is a story. So this is the thing I want you to gather from this is, oh, I had it written down, but again, Google isn't liking to show my slides. So you can write it down in your notes. Tip number one that we get from Fairy Queen: fairy tales are a framework to represent timeless realities. They represent the timeless things. Whatever you believe about baptism, you saw that represented here, didn't you? And other Christian views about baptism, particularly Edmund Spencer's views about baptism, became suddenly visible to you in a way that they wouldn't have if this were an argument. Remember, this is 1590. All of Europe is currently debating what baptism means and what communion means. Edmund Spencer doesn't join that debate. He tells a story. Because fairy tales not only talk about timeless things, they talk about present day things. Think about big issues being debated today. Maybe a story is the place to represent those. Now, jumping to tip number two. This is a short one. Symbols contain more content than the information they contain. Or you could put another way, you could say symbols contain more than they contain. For example, I'll show you the end of the battle. There's final their final fight. You can see the dragon's tail has been chopped off. It's because the tail was embedded in the shield, and the knight had to chop it off in order to use the shield. You can see the end of it there. What does this picture mean? What are some other things it's connected to or represents?
Well, Satan in the garden, the serpent. But, and this is probably off topic, but I can't help but say it. The dragon in Beowulf and the dragon in Hobbit, Smaug, are so thoroughly described, I thought, until I came here tonight.
Mm,
And this guy's description goes so deep. It's like a movie in letters, in words. It blew my mind the way he clatters, the way he spreads his scales like feathers. And this is Trina Shart Hyman's art, is it
mm-hmm,
not?
mm-hmm. It,
I remember checking that book out a lot. back in the day. But it reminds me of other dragons and other stories, only he's far more spiritual, I think.
It is, isn't it? Even though all the details are very physical, they represent spiritual things. And I'll note the depth of that description, that is the power of epic verse, if you want to dig
Yeah.
into literary types. The Hobbit is more of a folk tale and a novel, and that much description would just be a little out of place in that format. But here, he can go on for stanza after stanza describing it.
What was that part about his mouth, his jaw being like an abyss or something? I can't
Like an
remember what it
abyss.
said, but that seemed like hell to
Yep.
me.
Yep. Exactly. This so we have a picture of Christ fighting Satan, but here's the thing: this man is not intended to be Christ. He's a huge sinner. He's done very disappointing things leading up to this. This is part of the experience of reading this book is you can't believe the ways in which this man sins. But now he's standing in the place of Christ, performing the actions of Christ. So basically, we can look at this picture and say, yeah, that's the Red Cross Knight fighting the dragon from the Faerie Queene, but we can also look at the picture and say that is Christ fighting the serpent. And the picture also stands for a man fighting any dangerous animal or overcoming any kind of threat to his family or even just resisting the devil's temptations. And this is where it gets mystical. This is why symbols, this is tip number two. A man fighting a dangerous animal is already a symbol of Christ defeating death. And this is what the word symbol means is, and I have the Greek words here, let's see if I pull them up. This is what a symbol actually means is it is when an idea, when a something like a dragon or like this battle, when it represents something else so closely that it actually becomes that thing. It's a picture of a man fighting a dragon. It is also a picture of Christ defeating death at the same time. This is truly what a symbol means. Look at the words there. It comes from two words in Greek: sim, which means together, and bolos means attaching it together. A symbol is where two things, the representation and the represented idea, are put together so intimately that they are now the same. So this knight isn't Christ, but he is Christ. Questions on that? Did I define that well?
Yeah.
And you know what the opposite of symbolos is? Diabolos.
Oh,
Symbols put things together. The devil is
divide.
the apart taker. So here's something that's symbolically true as an example. I had this at the little history of this poem at first, but I moved it down here because it exemplifies what I mean by symbol and what these long ago poets meant by symbol. So here's something that Edmund Spenser may have believed. I don't know, but it's something that was definitely true in the Faerie Queene. Maybe you've heard this story. Joseph of Arimathea was actually the first missionary to England, and he brought the Grail, the cup from which the Lord had served the first Lord's Supper, and with which Joseph of Arimathea himself caught Jesus' blood out of the spear wound. I'm not going to let the Lord's blood fall right on the ground. And he had the cup with him, and he caught the blood. And he carried it to England, along with a piece of the Lord's crown of thorns. And when he got there, he struck the ground with his staff, and a spring of water came out. And he said, "This is the place for the monastery." And they built the monastery, and you can still go see it, and you can still go drink from that well. And he planted the thorn in the ground, and it grew into a bush, and you can still go see that. Now, for people in this room, Do you literally believe me when I tell you those things happened in England? It's okay to say no.
Yeah, no.
But it happened in, what do you think, Mom?
Well,
You're not saying no.
I was going to say yes, I believe you, because I remember somewhere an old lesson a long time ago, there's a monastery in the desert with a special bush of some kind that's really, really old. And I don't remember now what I was teaching in the lesson, but you're making me wonder if that monastery that I was showing them had some connection to this story.
Well, that could be a monastery that is near the burning bush.
That I think it's not in England. I feel like the one I told
It's
about was
desert.
not in England. So, but it's an interesting story.
So the reason I bring this up is this is a story of legendary England that Edmund Spenser is writing about. But the story is a symbol of things that happened. Did you know that the first missionaries were sent to England in 597? Pope Gregory the Great saw Anglo-Saxons in a slave market. He'd never seen blonde people before. It was a whole race of people he didn't know about. And then when he became Pope, he sent missionaries to England. Guess what they found? Churches. So England was Christianized long, long ago. This story of Joseph of Arimathea being the one who brought the gospel, it's symbolically true. We don't know if he literally was the man who brought the gospel, but is it true that the gospel came there so long ago nobody remembers for sure? Yeah. And that's one thing that a symbol is. We don't know if it was Joseph of Arimathea, and it doesn't have to be. Now, while we're in the symbol area, let's go back to last week, where I told you you must have a complex view of history to talk about complex ideas. I told you Edmund Spenser was a Protestant and that he was creating Protestant literature, but this isn't actually true. This may not be true in the way that you're thinking. Let's look at a complex view of history. The Pope only decided he was the supreme authority in 1054. And Rome really didn't double down on it until the 1200s. They were debating it with everybody. They were debating it with Constantinople. They were debating it with England. England had this whole controversy called the investiture controversy. England doesn't want a distant Italian official appointing English priests, right? We're different cultures, different languages.
That
So,
sounds familiar. No representation. I mean, no
about
taxation, but
that,
representation.
yeah, it's their similar problem in church instead of government, but good. So Rome doesn't double down on this until the 1200s. England and Rome have never really got along. England leaves Rome in the 1500s. So England was only Catholic for about 300 years. And this is what I tell my students. England isn't Protestant the way that you mean, because it was never Catholic in the way that you mean. Germany, Martin Luther, that's neighbors with Italy. The German emperor and the Italian pope worked hand in hand to repel invasions and to manage politics for centuries. Germany, that is a nation that used to be Catholic. That's Martin Luther's Reformation story. England did not used to be Catholic. And so when you read one version of the Reformation, you may not really understand what's going on in English culture. In fact, you go to an Anglican parish today, go to a conservative one, because they've got their own problems going right now. But when you go to a conservative Anglican parish today, it looks completely foreign to you. You may not know what is going on. It looks like it's from a country where they don't even speak your language. So when I say the Faerie Queene is this first piece of Protestant literature, I just mean it's anti-pope. But he
I
says
will
things.
say,
Go ahead.
we went to a church several times for like concerts and a funeral
Mhm.
that here in town it is called Episcopal. but it's like the Anglican. And to me, it seems like merry old England. It has the wood, dark wood everywhere, and it has like shields painted in places. It definitely, and stone walls. It seems to me like it would be out of like an English castle.
Hmm. It still looks very medieval. It does not. It doesn't look like a product of the Reformation the way that we usually think in America. And so the Fairy Queen says things like, "Baptism can cure your sin." It suggests that on a later part that Mary was actually sinless. It talks about doing penance to grow spiritually. These ideas are part of the Protestant heritage. Presbyterians are Protestant, Baptists are Protestant, Fairy Queen is Protestant. This is a wide and diverse label. And I think it's important today for Protestants to understand each other. I think this is more important today than it's ever been, as there are serious attacks on all sides of Christianity. So that's kind of building on last time. Have a complex view of history. Don't stick books like this into boxes. Have a complex view. But back to literature and symbols. I don't know. Do you think this part on symbols has gone too far? Should I go to tip number 3 already? Okay, because stepping back, I went to history and I'm going back to symbols. Now I've shown you what a symbol is. Let me show you a way to misread a symbol. And I've actually seen somebody do this in a footnote in Fairy Queen. Here's how understanding symbols helps you read. Because in an earlier part of Fairy Queen, the knight sins. He is fooled by a witch, and he ends up getting locked in this dungeon. And Edmund Spenser says this is a dungeon where the blood of innocent children has soaked the floor. Can you think of times children were killed in the Bible?
Oh, yeah.
Of course you can. Rachel still weeps, the Bible says. So my edition has footnotes by a very modern day, very Protestant commentator, and he says, look, this is talking about the blood of Protestants who were murdered by Catholics. Well, I teach a history class, so I have to be that guy. This book is written in 1590. Catholics and Protestants have been killing each other for 2 generations at this point. If Spenser were talking about recent bloodshed, I think he would be blaming both sides.
Plus, he said children.
Children.
He said children.
This is the blood of. This is the blood that was shed by Herod, Pharaoh,
Yeah.
the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the priests of Moloch. We can go on and on. Yes, it's about Bloody Mary, but it's Bloody Mary is just part of it. In a symbol, you can talk about many things all at once because this is also the blood of Abel. And it's even blood that's going to be shed after the Fairy Queen was even written. This is the blood shed by Muslims and communists and abortionists. The Fairy Queen manages to talk about all of those things. If we just said this is about Bloody Mary killing some Protestants during her very brief reign, we would miss a lot of the power in the book. Rose, do you have a hand up?
Well, it's sort of funny that she had a very brief reign. I don't know why.
She was so violent, she lost support.
Mm-hmm.
There's one short answer to that.
Why you don't be violent?
She wasn't eaten by worms, like like one of the Herods, but we can imagine that the end of her reign was a judgment by God. So symbols contain more than they seem to contain. Don't ever reduce one. All right, tip number 3. Do you want a less abstract tip that you can apply right away in the way that you read? Here is a thing Edmund Spenser is the master at. Although I'm going to introduce it, since we don't have time to read the whole book, I'm going to introduce it in Star Wars. And if I had a large enough room, this would be really fun. We'll see what I get though with just us. Who is the teacher in Star Wars?
You want to say it?
Obi-Wan?
Anybody
Yeah,
have
it could be Obi-Wan.
anyone have a different answer?
Don't tell us. I thought it was Obi-Wan also, Rose. Must be
Yeah.
an earlier teacher. Maybe there's an earlier teacher.
No,
You mean
no.
Yoda?
It's a later teacher.
You mean
Yeah,
Yoda?
Oh,
you could, if it was a big group, we'd probably have somebody say both. And that is my point. Notice in Star Wars, Obi-Wan's role morphs into Yoda. Obi-Wan goes away because of plot reasons, but the teacher is still here. He just looks different. He doesn't look very different. He's even wearing the same clothes.
He looks pretty green though.
Hmm. He's wearing the same. They're both
Obi-Wan
old.
was taller um uh than Luke, and then he was probably just like a regular old man, and then Yoda's like 900 years old, and he's shorter than Esther.
Judge him by his size, do you?
No, just I'm pointing out differences.
Similar question. Who is the bad guy in Star Wars?
Well,
Darth
Darth Vader,
Vader.
But
not
The
Anakin.
Emperor.
Yes,
the
also
Emperor. The
the
bad guy in
yes.
the bad guy in Star Wars morphs from being Vader to being the Emperor because as soon as we find out certain things about Vader, he's not the bad guy anymore. The bad guy still exists, but it becomes someone else. It's like the teacher exists and has two different masks, or the evil exists and has two different masks. And this is odd to think about in a film because they're literally different actors. But when you're reading Edmund Spencer, he changes those masks over and over again. Here's one thing that happens. The Red Cross Knight defeats another knight named Sans Foy, no faith. Names are very literal in Edmund Spencer. And as soon as he wins his battle with no faith, this evil enchantress runs into his arms to tempt him with false love. The temptation to have no faith, it's gone, instantly replaced with the temptation to love somebody, to be with somebody that you shouldn't. Or another time when Red Cross Knight fights this monster called Error. And she's this huge snake lady with millions of babies that pour out of her mouth because once you make one error, it gives birth to many more errors. And she has the power to split up the path that you're walking on into many paths so you get lost. Later, he meets the actual whore of Babylon, who is sitting on a dragon and has millions of little followers. Snake lady, snake on the upper half, lower half is a snake. Whore of Babylon, sitting on a dragon, with many children following her. Later on, meets another mother-daughter combo who are involved in um, lies and prostitution, respectively. And so you see this anti-mother just change her face over and over again through the poem, like it's one character. And if you're reading it as separate characters, you'll miss it. And then he even does, here's why Spencer is so good at this. Later on, when Red Cross Knight is being healed from his sin, he goes to a hospital, and the lady ministering to people is named Love, and she is a mother with hundreds of children all around her. The good mother. So you see what he's doing. He's got this same idea that wears all these different masks over and over again. And so that's my final tip for that we learn from Spencer because he's the master of it. So when you are reading, watch for a character's role to get taken over by another character, and sometimes another one and another one. The way that people change their faces in a dream, because that's what a fairy story is.
Well, it makes me think of when we're teaching through Narnia and kids will ask on if they usually know Lion before they know Magician's Nephew. When we read Magician's Nephew, they'll inevitably ask, is this lady, the lady who destroys Charm, Is she the same lady that's in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? And then later you read Silver Chair, and the kids say, is this the same lady that was? And they're not quite the same. They're not, but you can tell they are of the same ilk. And the other thing I was going to say, when you talked about, I didn't want to interrupt you all the time, but I've been making so many connections. You were talking about the prince killing the lady snake. That's Rillian.
Mhm.
That's Prince Rillian, isn't it, Leia Rose?
Yes, and then also, I think the green lady is a different lady, but I'm pretty sure Jadis ate the apple and turned into the White Witch. And
Shivers.
I'm pretty sure.
Shivers.
yeah, and then also the magician's nephew is this same old man that the Pevensies go to.
Mhm.
The Professor Kirk. The
Yes.
old knock. He is a teacher. He's a picture of a teacher, a symbol of it. Here we go again. Symbol of Lewis's teacher. I was also thinking Tobin Lewis is so gifted and brilliant to us today. But if we met him, he would say, "Oh no, it's Spencer who is
Yeah.
brilliant."
And Boethius
Yeah.
is so about a symbol, about symbols being more than one thing and two things, two people being the same character. It reminds me of a student asked me, young student at Wilson Hill, when we were learning about the death of the Lord in the gospel, and she asked, "Wait, did Jesus die on the same mountain where Abraham sacrificed Isaac?" And I was like, not physically the same mountain, but yes, exactly. It is the same mountain, even though it's two different parts of the earth. Loved that question.
That's a sweet moment. It makes me think of something I'm working with some ladies who are reading through Till We Have Faces right now, and I'm making slides for them. And I had just put up this quotation today. I didn't even know that it would connect with what you're talking about. But he's talking about. Do you remember how Tolkien said to Lewis, "You have got to become a Christian because this is the myth that came true."
Yeah.
All those myths and stories that you love so much, you can't love them the way you do with the knight killing the dragon and the ladies saved and not believe the one that came true. And this is one thing Lewis said. He says the word myth, which you're talking about symbols, but anyway, the word myth in its academic definition means a story with deep power and symbolic meaning. When studied in the academic sense, it's that meaning that is important, not whether the story actually happened.
Yes.
Like the little girl asked about the mountain.
Hmm.
It's what the mountain means.
What the mountain means. And so you were about to, yeah, the witches in Narnia, because I did think they were the same woman, but they are, but even though they're not, they are the same witch, even though they're not physically the same witch. And there's another one in Narnia that I was just thinking, oh yeah, we were reading Dawn Treader right now, and it's like every island is the same island. They go there. There's some mix of rain and sunshine, and Lewis describes how they land there and what temperature it is. And there's something about gold. They go to a place where human beings sell each other for gold. They go to a place where you jump into the water and you become gold. You fall asleep on gold and become a dragon. But those people who were selling slaves were like dragons already. So it's fascinating. Go ahead, Rose.
So, and then also, um, it's a dragon. The original dragon is the color of lead.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, when Edmund gets the caps of his boots in the gold water, then thankfully he wasn't barefoot. Then then he said they were like lead.
Yeah.
I don't remember why gold and lead are connected, but they are.
because the goal of sorcery is to transform lead into gold and become rich. But C.S. Lewis says if you fall asleep on a bed of gold, you become lead.
Yep.
And when you are baptized by Aslan, you change from lead into gold, or from a dragon back into a real boy.
You know that another symbol that Lewis really picked up from Spencer, he carried into his heart is water. You showed us
Mhm.
the water a minute
Yeah.
ago. And I was talking to the kids about so many symbols of water throughout his work. Remember when Caspian is very old at the beginning of Silverchair, and then at the end, Jill and Eustace get to see him, and he's alive but in the water, and then he gets up, and they're kind of freaked out because they think he's a
Yeah.
ghost. So there he's in water. Eustace, the baptism of Eustace getting his dragon skin removed. But another one that I've just run across, Tobin, is in Till We Have Faces. Do you remember that story very well about a queen, Oriwal?
Yes,
It's the story of Cupid and Psyche retold in Lewis's own way
yeah,
and greatly expanded. But anyway, her sister lives in a palace that Oriwal can't see.
yeah,
So she thinks it's not there and she thinks her sister's nuts. Well, then, as she's leaving, visiting her sister, and they're out in the wilderness, she turns one more time and decides to crouch down on her knees. Mind you, it says on her knees to get a drink from a stream. While she's on her knees, she looks up at the mountain. It's nighttime, the mist is falling, and she gets a glimpse of that castle. She sees it
yeah.
just for a moment, and then the mist rolls in and it's gone. And she climbs to her feet and she wonders if she saw it or not. And her heart is very steely cold and hard. So she doesn't know that she saw it or not. But it's significant to me. I don't think it's an accident that Lewis had her on her knees and with water when the god let her see that.
And also, I think she sees she basically sees the Son of Man over the river, appear over the river like Daniel did. I think in another part of that book at the same river. Just and I skipped this part because I felt I was running too long, but I was going to talk about another symbol because when we talked about the water that the Red Cross Knight falls into, and I say, well, actually, C.S. Lewis uses this water, doesn't he? And I was going to read a little bit of Silver Chair, but yeah, look at that, Oriwell.
Is it Jill when
Yep.
she says, "Oh, read it, read it"? I know the part you mean. Do you have it marked?
I have it in the yeah, I had it in the slide, but I can pause on the picture. If you're thirsty, you may drink. For a second, she stared here and there, wondering who had spoken. Then the voice said again, if you are thirsty, come and drink. It was deeper, wilder, and stronger, a sort of heavy, golden voice. It did not make her any less frightened than she had been before, but it made her frightened in rather a different way. Are you not thirsty? Said the lion. I'm dying of thirst, said Jill. Then drink, said the lion. Will you promise not to do anything to me if I do come? Said Jill. I make no promise, said the lion. Oh dear, said Jill, coming another step nearer. I suppose I must go and look for another stream then. There is no other stream, said the lion. It never occurred to Jill to disbelieve the lion. No one who had seen his stern face could do that, and her mind suddenly made itself up. It was the worst thing she ever had to do, but she went forward to the stream, knelt down, and began scooping up water in her hand. It was the coldest, most refreshing water she had ever tasted. You didn't need to drink much of it, for it quenched your thirst at once. And here is I we kind of talked about this part already, but C.S. Lewis is kind of giving us a scene about a little girl being baptized before she's even Christian. And then he says, come here. And she has to. That's what it says. And she had to. And then he says, let me tell you why I called you into Narnia.
And then she says that she and Eustace, uh, it was their idea to be
Mm-hmm.
asked. And then he says that they wouldn't have asked unless he had wanted them to come.
Yeah. At our house, we read Dawn Treader and we read Silver Chair, and now we're reading Dawn Treader. It just kind of happened that way, and that's actually a really good order to read them in because it reveals different things, and it's so wonderful to see Eustace, who has never been to church, turn to the east and pray with his hands out because he saw Ramandu do it on the island, and he asks to go into Narnia. Really wonderful book about people having a relationship with Aslan when they don't understand who he even is. That's why it might be the best one.
Silverchair is my favorite. I've learned, as far as my Christian walk, I've learned more about how it works from that book than maybe the other ones. But I think it's so important that that baptism of Jill happens after she has messed up real bad. Do you
Yeah.
remember about Eustace going off the cliff, Leia Rose?
Yeah.
So that was a real bad thing that happened, and then Aslan gives her this chance, and she alone hears the four signs. Eustace is not there,
Yep.
and she must tell Eustace what Aslan told her.
And notice she goes to confession after being baptized. He asks her, "Where is the boy? How did he fall?" Not because Aslan doesn't know, but because she needs to confess her sin. And no matter what you believe about going to confession, the story resonates with you, and that's what I'm trying to show about this.
Well, it's like any good father. Go sit down, and I'm going to come and talk to you in a minute. And
Mhm.
you know, when he comes, he's going to say, "What happened? Tell me what you did."
Yep.
And sometimes you start out like Diggory,
Uh-huh.
um, dancing around the truth until you finally, when he rang the bell, for instance, um, he was the one that caused all the trouble,
Yep.
brought all the trouble into Narnia right when she was a day old.
Yeah. Well, that was my 3 tips on getting the most out of symbols, and I certainly have learned these from the Fairy Queen at a deeper level than I understood them before. Look at this, my pictures are working again. Here's the cover of that book if you want to. Well, all 3 of you have seen it, but if you're watching the recording and you want to find an accessible Fairy Queen that it starts out at a basic level with beautiful illustrations, here it is. Because Fairy Queen it's dense and it's deep, but we should follow in C.S. Lewis's uh, example and learn to understand deep books. Hope this encourages you to go read it. Well, thank you guys for joining me, even though it was only my family members this time. We
Thank
got it
you.
on. We got it recorded now.
So Leah Rose, you don't own a copy of that book. You guys don't own a copy of it.
I thought we did, but apparently not.
I think we just check it out of the library so much that it seemed like we own it.
Hmm.
Maybe we could buy it from the library. From
I
the
think
library.
we have at the same library they have series of unfortunate events, the one in Pinehurst. So I think we can get it soon.
I mean, well,
All right. Well, I'll end the recording. Everybody have a good night, and I hope you'll join me for part 3 on Fantasties. If you're able to come, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that too, because you've actually taught it in the classroom and I haven't.
It's been a while.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Keep reading.